So one TV programme and 14 years of work in the Chamber of the House of Commons all comes to a head. And of course, now the House of Commons have decided they're going to take they're going to take the unprecedented step of overturning all the convictions of the 1,000 sub-postmasters who were wrongly convicted on Horizon evidence alone. Normally there's a separation of powers, so you've got the judiciary and you've got the legislature, the MPs, the House of Lords, and this is pretty unprecedented. And they'll say this is because no one can get compensation until they've had their criminal conviction overturned, and the courts were taking too long to overturn all the convictions. And then people can have their compensation. All I'll say to you is I got Susan Rudkin's conviction overturned in December 2020. But Mr. and Mrs. Rudkin still haven't had the compensation from the post office for all the trauma that they suffered for 11 years. That's shocking. That was our own government that did that, and they covered it up. I knew, they knew, the post office knew in 2015 that all those sub-postmasters were innocent. The 1,000 that got criminal convictions, that's the tip of the iceberg, because many, many thousands of sub-postmasters would have had deficits on their computers, which they were then putting their money into their own, their hand into their own pocket and putting that money back into the till. And there's a compensation scheme now opening up for them. I actually had a constituent, someone moved into the constituency and asked for a surgery with me about 7 years ago. And they said, I want to talk about the Horizon system. He said, you won't know anything about Horizon. I said, well, I might know a bit more about it than you think. And he'd moved in from the Forest of Dean. So that would have been Mark Harper, MP's constituent. And his story was that he took on a sub-postmastership, and you have to be vetted, and you can't have a criminal record, and you've got to be a good character. And he did all that. And he said, and all that happened every month, I kept having shortfalls, £100, £200, £300, £500. And every month I was putting money back in to balance the books up because they were liable. And after 18 months of that, he turned around to the post office and said, I've just had enough. I don't want to do this game anymore. I can't make any money out of it. All my wages are going back in the till to make up these shortfalls. So can you find someone to take the post office over? And they did. And he said, and even on the last day when they did the stock take and balanced all the books up, he put £70 out of his own wallet to balance the books on the last day, signed and said, we're done, aren't we? And they said, yes, we are. And he came to North West Leicestershire and he was bombed out. And he said, all I want to do is look after my mum. She's old. So he became a carer for his mother. And his only income was his carer's allowance. And 6 months after, he'd signed that everything balanced at the post office and he was out of it, and he thought he was out of it. They came back to him and said, you owe us another 1,500 quid. And they took it out of his carer's allowance. Now, one of the first things that Ron Warmington discovered when he went into, and I don't know if any of you have been involved in business accounting packages, but they've all got a suspense account. And on double entry bookkeeping, when you move things around, you have to move it from one place to another. If you're not sure which nominal code to code it under, you put it into suspense until you find where it should go, whether it should be in this sales or that sales or the other sales. You can put it into suspense. The post office's accounting system, which was a Rolls-Royce system, had between 1 million and 1.5 million incomplete transactions in surplus cash, where people had paid money to the post office and not had their goods or services on average every year. And after 4 years, the post office were filing it back to profit and taking bonuses on it from the management. And I put it to you that the time that they ran the Horizon system was about 20 years. That if you add all that money up, that was the money that they took out of the sub-postmasters in incomplete transactions. And that's where the money went, and it helped to. But at the time the government wanted to sell off the post office, they wanted to sell off Royal Mail. They didn't want any trouble, and that's why it was covered up from 2015. The 555 application that the sub-postmasters went to, they'd got the Fujitsu evidence. We'd shared it with them. They took the post office to court. The post office played litigation, checkbook litigation. They had all the power of the state. And they spent something like £150 million of your money defending a case which they knew they were guilty, because that they knew the same evidence that I'd seen and the other 5 MPs and the government, and they still let it run on. That's why it ran on for another 5 years until eventually the post office lost to the sub postmasters. But of course, the sub postmasters had to go with no win, no fee, and the lawyers they used who won the case for them took 85% of the compensation. That left actually Mr. and Mrs. Rudkin with £15,000 compensation. That's all they got. That was their share of the 555. But we've managed to overturn that now. But for anything like that to be able to happen, it is almost unbelievable. And unless you've actually seen the evidence and saw it all materialize, it is a fantastic conspiracy theory.